You're watching Global Trade This Week with Pete Mento and Doug Draper.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to another jam-packed, exciting edition of Global Trade This Week. I'm Pete Mento, coming to you from the International Trade Conference in Isle of Palm, South Carolina. With me, as always, is the Oreo cookie to the cream in my Oreo cookie sandwich. The shrimp in my gumbo, Mr. Doug Draper, out in Colorado. Doug, how are you? Good to see Troy back.
Yes, Troy he was on vacation, but it's all back in business. But yeah, Colorado's good. I'm in my 3x3 soundproof box in my co-working space right now. So I think looks like you got a better view and a more enjoyable day ahead.
We'll see about enjoyable, but it is nice. It's kind of chilly here, so there will be no dipping in the ocean today for me, Doug.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. No.
Yeah. Well, KB and I were talking just offline or off air that the snow has arrived, not in large quantities, but he was up camping and I was up in Crested Butte, Colorado this weekend with a whole bunch of college buddies and wives. So it was pretty mellow, but there is snow on the peaks and it is definitely feeling like fall and close to winter. So we're excited.
I was doing a lot of work-related drinking, Doug, this weekend. One of the problems with this business is these meetings, these symposiums, these trade shows. It's just a collection of freight people, and freight people do enjoy tipping them back. So no exception.
But all the work gets done at the bar afterwards. It's it's the chatter during the day, but the work and the connections happen probably after 9 or 10 o'clock.
Definitely for guys like you and I. We're trying to close deals and make things happen. That's certainly how that goes. But I don't have it in me anymore, man. I'm generally ready for bed about 9-ish. I'm not as bad as you. I'm not catching the 6 o'clock news, watching the rerun of Matlock and hitting the sack. But I'm not much better, pal.
Yeah. Well, Matlock is a good entree into some of our halftime that our audience will hear. I think that's the right era, but we'll figure it out. So
yeah. Well, I introduced today, so that means that you're going to give us our first topic this week. And before we start, as always, thank you to the good people at Cap Logistics for sponsoring the show, a company that neither of us work for. I don't think we've mentioned that nearly enough, but they're positively wonderful in supporting the show. A fantastic company for those of you that watch and support us. Please do check them out at caplogistics.com. We can't thank them enough for their positively incredible support, endless support of the show, and for loaning us Keenan, who for all of his faults does do a good job producing the show. Mm-hmm. So with that said, Doug, what do you got for us, pal?
All right. Well, this dovetails a little bit to what I spoke about last week or the week before, but it's related to Parcel. My entree into this crazy logistics world 25 odd years ago was in the parcel business through Airborne Express. That's a drinking story for sure at a later date. But so I have an affinity to Parcel and kind of how things go and evolve, and that is certainly cyclical and seasonal. And we are entering the season for Parcel and e-commerce and the holiday surge. So one thing that caught my attention, Pete, is that USPS has announced that they are doing no seasonal surcharges this year. And what that has done is there's other regional carriers, regional parcel carriers that are kind of following suit. So there was a big one up in Chicago. They dubbed themselves as like the 5th biggest parcel carrier in the country, but OSM Worldwide, another company called Viho, and Axel Hire. Now, they're all involved with injecting parcels further down into the USPS delivery behemoth to help reduce cost and get that final mile delivery as inexpensively as possible. So my whole point there is that, all right, the post office said no surcharges. And then subsequent companies that support that business have also said that. So the question that came in my mind is like, what's going to happen with the big boys, with FedEx and UPS, and how they're going to handle it? I don't know. I think what's transpired is that everybody hedged their bets during the UPS potential strike. And there were executives all over the country that pushed down to their director level and said, find us a solution, make sure we don't get burned, and look at diversification to make sure our parcels to our clients and customers are not interrupted. And so what that did was a lot of diversification, a lot of additional companies, regional parcel carriers that may not be household names to most people listening to the show, but it's been dispersed a little bit as far as the different types of companies and the different way people are engaging with parcel. And I think that the USPS announced it. Companies that support that injection into the final mile have followed. And I think that we're going to see a mellowing of surcharges around the parcel delivery mechanism as we roll into Q4 for all the things that we've spoken about with the economy and interest rates going up and people just a little wary about what's going to happen as we end the year and start 2024. So my whole point is I think some of the, oh my gosh, you mean I have to pay an extra $5 to get it here just because I ordered it between these 2 months period? I don't think it's going to happen this year, Pete.
Yeah. When I read your topics today and I saw that, I think was it 2 weeks ago, you were talking about how, what was it? UPS was going to give people refunds.
Yeah.
Or in order to break their contract with FedEx. It's almost like rabbit season, duck season, rabbit season, duck season, where it's a buyer's market, it's a seller's market, it's a buyer's market, it's a seller's market, right? The folks at UPS and FedEx were going to deal with a possible strike, so everyone was going crazy to lock in rates and get contracts, and we got to run to these providers to get things done, and then that all fell apart, and now there's no volume, so everyone's trying to drop their rates as fast as they can to try to sign on volume out of nowhere. And, while that's happening, the economy is just getting worse and worse from an input standpoint. There's really not a lot of inventory moving around. We're going to talk about that in a minute too, so all these providers are finding themselves scrambling, trying to find someone to buy space. So people are saying, well, what the hell did I just go through this exercise for? They got to go to their leadership and say, hey, when I told you we should take care of this, might have been wrong. Are you gonna be wrong again? In 6 months from now, you're going to come back to me and say, hey, we made a mistake. It just feels like that lack of stability, that lack of confidence in the marketplace. It's really all a marketplace wants. They want some kind of at least a hint of stability. We just can't seem to bring it to that market right now, or any market. I don't care if it's ocean freight, air freight. You just can't seem to find it, man. It's starting to really grind on people.
Yeah, I think that's right. The kid, here's, I don't know if this is an analogy or a comparison, but kids that you raise, they need barriers. They need to know what they can and can't do. They need that stability so they can learn efficiently. And I was just talking to my wife about it. She's a first grade teacher, that they need barriers and guidance and rails. So there's some consistency and feel comfort with moving forward. And I think that's kind of an analogy, if that's the right word, related to what you just indicated.
Yeah. Well, unless your parents raised me like me, barefoot in a pair of overalls and no t-shirt, free ranging it with, watermelon and drinking out of a fire hose. I'm lucky I can read. Yeah.
Chucking stakes out into the forest and saying, go.
Pharaoh like Lord of the Flies. That's about the way it works.
Yeah. All right, my friend. Let her rip. Your topic.
Another weird week out of the Fed and our friends in Washington, D.C., who are kind of like Kevin Bacon at the end of Animal House. All is well. Be calm. There's no reason to freak out. They're telling us that inflation is exactly where they want it. We got them right where we want them. Everything's fine. And they decided not to raise rates. And then inflationary numbers come out. Now, keep in mind, we adjust these. So a month from now, we're going to get an adjustment back from all the central banks, all the economists, and they're going to say, okay, maybe we were off a little bit. But inflation globally continues to rise. And inflation here might have been a little stagnant, but what it feels like it's doing is it's just bumping on the ceiling. It's just sort of bumping on the ceiling. Maybe it's coming down a little bit, but it's bumping on a ceiling, looking to go up again. It hasn't stopped rising. And they're telling us everything is fine. But what I think they're not doing is looking at the macro picture globally. We're not seeing the influx of volume that we thought we would. We're not seeing consumer confidence rise. We're certainly not seeing people going out into the retail sector and spending a lot of money now. The numbers that we're seeing on retail for back to school, we haven't gotten them officially in yet, but they're not looking good anecdotally from what we're hearing from the major retailers. And that also goes back to the e-com sellers. They're not giving us great numbers either. So if we're not seeing consumption rise, which is the main driver of the American economy, what's that telling us about what's going to happen with inflation? Job market, unemployment's not really rising dramatically. We're not seeing a continuous rise in wages. Our home situation is exactly where it was. People are not selling off their homes to go someplace else because they're keeping these outrageously low mortgages they had before. Doug, we are in a stall. We're in this stall and nothing that we can do can fix it. It might take an external force to do something to make inflation go away. And other than the Chinese economy finally collapsing or one of these regional conflicts really blowing up, which is probably a bad phrase to use on it, I don't really know in the short term what can make it better. So I'm still saying February 2024, we're going to see the first spark on it. And 2025, you're going to see a major dump in the U.S. house market.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I think your whole point is as it's bumping up against the ceiling and there's still some uncertainty, I'm glad that the Fed is not raising the interest rate because that impacts me personally with my housing situation.
Yeah.
So I was nervous about that. But I think the point is it's just calm down. Let's stay the course. Let's get through this. Let's wait and see, which is, the pendulum has gone back and forth dramatically in the last 3 years, with COVID, just like this injection. And I think everybody's just chill out. Let's just wait and see, stay the course. We've seen some businesses that are just shedding non-core competency, things that were cool to buy during COVID because of, the logistics tech that came in. So my point with all this, Pete, is that I think you're going to see a lot of people just chilling out, a lot of companies just waiting it out. And to your point, exactly what's going to change that? Some sort of external force, which could be good or could be bad.
Oh, it's always bad, Doug. It's always bad. I'm never optimistic. In the years we've been doing the show, have I ever been positive once? I don't think that I have, buddy. I don't think I've ever been positive, not even once. So
yeah. Cool. All right. Well, let's jump into halftime. Pete, you did a great job of explaining Cap Logistics and our connection and relationships there, but we'd encourage everybody to check out caplogistics.com. They're a great supporter of our program, and they're a great company out there that can help you out. So good halftime today, Pete. You want to go first?
Yeah, man, I'll go first. So sad news yesterday, Suzanne Summers, famous for a lot of things, but to me, famous for her role in Three's Company, passed away yesterday. And she was, one of those iconic starlets of the 1970s. She was one of called them the poster girls. So it was her, Farrah Fawcett, the Charlie's Angels girls. She was one of those sex symbols that older gentlemen like Doug and I grew up with in the 1970s. Might have had a poster of her on your wall, but she was on a show called Three's Company. That was a sitcom, 1970s. I think it was ABC, 1970s ABC primetime sitcom that had a pretty wacky premise for the time. Like if we tried to sell it now, Doug, everybody would be like, huh? But the idea was pretty simple. Three young working adults that couldn't afford an apartment close to the beach in LA. They lived in, I think it was Redondo Beach. And in order to have a man living with two women, he had to tell the landlord that he was gay. And that was sort of the premise. John Ritter was the character who had to pretend he was gay when he in fact was not. And he was living with these two insanely attractive women. And Mr. Roper and his wife were constantly almost catching him, on a date with a girl or down at the Regal Beagle. And it was one of these shows in the 70s when I was a young guy. I watched with my parents, as much as there was some sexual undertones with it. It was pretty tame, it was pretty vanilla. But there were other shows in the 70s that were kind of a similar vein. The Love Boat, right? The Love Boat was a marketing gimmick done by Princess Cruise Lines that would have 3 to 4 parallel storylines that ran in any one given 1 hour episode that might intersect with each other, but they would have great guest stars. Suzanne Summers was actually in the pilot of that show. It was an excellent. JJ Walker was in that one too. These were great shows. Fantasy Island was another one. Good Times, Sanford and Son, one of the best TV shows that was ever made, in my opinion. The Jeffersons, All in the Family. These were all wonderful shows that came out in the 70s that I have been watching again. Bob Newhart, in particular, I've probably watched 5 seasons of Bob Newhart from the 1970s. They're just all fantastic. And when I look at those shows, I'm amazed at how well they still hold up. And we mentioned earlier Matlock, which was actually 80s, but a lot of the 80s ones are the same. The detective shows of the 1970s are still fantastic. If you have a chance to watch Beretta, if you have a chance to watch Starsky and Hutch, if you have a chance to watch the Rockford Files, these are all Quincy. These are all still excellent, excellent shows even now.
Yeah. When you shot that over to me, I was thinking, I was like, there was this one gentleman that was the creative behind a handful of shows. You mentioned a few of them, but Norman Lear.
Norman Lear was a genius. Yeah.
And first of all, the guy's 101 years old. He's still alive.
He's still alive,
right?
Yeah.
He's still alive. And so for I won't go into, you can Google more Norman Lear, but All in the Family, which you mentioned, Maude, which was a little bit before, I kind of had heard of it, didn't know much about it. Sanford and Son, which you mentioned, One Day at a Time, The Jeffersons, which was a commentary on a social commentary like nobody's, it was a generation ahead of its time, right? And then Good Times, you made mention of that. So I was thinking Norman Lear and what he brought in the 70s. I think 2 or 3 of those shows were like 1 or 2 for years on the different stations. So anyway, that's what popped in my mind when I heard the 70s thing, is that I can't believe the guy's still alive, 101, and the amount of impact he had on comedy television in the 70s is unbelievable.
He and Mel Brooks are still best friends. They still have lunch almost every day.
Really?
Yeah. One of my favorite trivia questions, or just dopey things that fill my head. The interracial couple that lived next to the Jeffersons. I don't know if you remember this, but
yeah.
There was a black woman. The mother is Lenny Kravitz's mother. So
really?
Yeah, Lenny Kravitz, he grew up in a entertainment family, and that was his mom. So and she's from New Orleans, so of course it's how I know all that crap, right? But that was one of those things that always got my attention. But you talk about funny. I mean, you can sit down and watch 5 episodes of Sanford and Son or The Jeffersons or All in the Family. You will laugh out loud, and then you'll say to yourself, "There is no way we could ever make this show in 2023. They would never air a single episode of this today."
Yeah, that's exactly it. I was thinking that.
So, what you got, man?
All right. Well, speaking with the entertainment theme, I don't know if you knew, but literally today is Disney, not Walt Disney, but the company Disney turns 100. Right? Been around for 100 years, and I started thinking about, all right. Initially, Pete, I was going to talk about companies that had been around for over 100 years, and I kind of going down a wormhole with that, and I decided to ditch it. But my take on this one is that Disney's had a tremendous impact, but really it was in 1928 that Mickey Mouse first joined us, but his name was Steamboat Willie. And it was kind of, I guess, a landmark, if that's the right word to use, in animation. I think it was the first time that sound and silent animation kind of came together, and that was kind of really the catalyst of what started, the bread and butter at Disney, which is just these amazing animated movies that our kids grew up with. Well, let me back up even further. You and I grew up with. Fantasia was another big one back in the day, and then some of the movies that are coming out. The only thing is that Disney, they've like gone overboard with commercializing some of their movies. If you look at the animation movies that have happened in the last probably 5 years, like I don't even recognize any of the names, right? I mean, it was like, I don't even know they made this. It's almost, they're just cranking them out because it's the Disney franchise. So anyway, Disney's 100 today. And it all started with Steamboat Willie. I'm sure you've seen that one when he's doing the wheel on the steamboat and kind of bouncing around. But that was the one show, the one animated cartoon where they mixed still and sound together that really catapulted Disney, at least in my opinion. I'm sure you can have somebody make a comment on that one. But anyway, happy birthday, Disney, 100. Not quite as old as Norman Lear, but we'll give you a little credit there.
In a strange twist, Doug, I'm visiting them on a client call tomorrow. So, so that's a little strange. But to me, Disney, now they're just an entertainment behemoth. They purchased one of the most important brands to me, which I know you don't care about, but they do own the Star Wars Lucasfilm franchise. They own Marvel. So in my world, they kind of own a major part of my entertainment universe. Mm-hmm. So to me, that's a big deal. On another side of that, though, in all of my travels around the world, particularly in the 80s and the 90s, are just iconic. It was part of the American identity. When I was in Russia as a young guy, people identified Mickey Mouse and Minnie and Daffy and all of it with America. People that lived in Russia, people lived in China, they really wanted to come to Disney World. They just saw that almost like Coca-Cola and McDonald's driving a Chevy and baseball with being American, that whole Disney part of the world. And it really has become a global brand. And I don't know if America and Disney are so much tied together now as it is a global concept. You've got a Disneyland in France. There's one in Hong Kong now. It really has kind of overcome that connection with our country and has become something that I think the whole world owns now. And, the family itself now still owns part of the business from what I understand, but that I think is an interesting legacy to have from the perspective of something that was started with one man and one pen and one piece of paper. So it's a pretty cool story.
Wow. Very eloquent. One man, one pen, one piece of paper 100 years ago. Love it.
Doug, when I met Stan Lee, and I think I've shared the story in the past when I finally met him, and my daughter and I, she was younger then. She didn't quite understand what a big deal it was. And he shook my hand. And I just thought to myself, that hand created and drew almost every character that I care about when I was a kid, like when I was Charlotte's age, all the X-Men, Spider-Man, the Hulk, like I was blown away. I was like psychologically liquefied. I've met presidents. I didn't care as much as when, as when I met Stan Lee, man. Like I thought I was out. It was amazing. And then when she said, Charlotte, what do you want to be when you grow up? And she said, I want to be an artist. And Stan Lee said, well, are you drawing now? And she said, I am. And he said, well, then don't ever let anyone tell you that you're not, sweetheart. And I thought I was going to cry. And to this day, my daughter still remembers that. We have a picture with him, and he died a year later. And just to, have had that opportunity for her to meet him. And now she's become such a massive fan of Marvel, and she's a bigger DC fan. So I failed as a father, but she's become such a big comic book fan. To have had that opportunity was a really special moment.
Good. Well, we're going to pivot away from that nerd topic that you just spoke about. I'm sure Scott Lee, what's the guy's name?
Whatever. Hey, you talk kindly about the USPS today, so I feel like I won. I'm going to get you pro drones by the end of today.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, hey, Pete, I'm not sure if you realize, but peak season's over, by the way. Done. It's official. And nobody really knew peak season even was here. Came and went, right? Ships aren't full. Rates are still in the decline. And there's this association or this group called Hackett Associates maybe, predicted no cargo growth for the near-term horizon. It's a little ambiguous as near-term months or years. But my point with this, Pete, is that Q1 is traditionally, I've heard the term quiet season in the import business and ocean freight. There's just not a lot going on, and then I think the second quarter is kind of like food and produce, and it kind of goes through four cycles. But my whole point is if nobody even had any impact with the 2023 peak season, what is the quiet season going to look like in Q1 of 2024? With the things we spoke about on your first topic, everybody calm down, wait and see. Let's just, not do anything that's going to upset the apple cart. We didn't have a peak season. We'll see what consumers do in Q4 in the holiday season. I'm afraid that Q1 in the quiet season is going to turn into the silent season, right? That it's going to be just non-existent, and it's going to be pretty impactful. I don't want to say negatively impactful, because I'm hoping for a little bit of a light there, but I'm interested to see what the hell happens in Q1, because nothing blipped in Q3 and Q4 related to peak season. Maybe things, Pete, before you jump in, maybe after Chinese New Year, right? There's been always some pent up demand because Chinese New Year with a couple years off or a couple weeks off, that pent up demand kind of, catapults a little bit, but I don't know what's going to happen. So maybe things will change after Chinese New Year, but I'm a little nervous on Q1.
Nope. No,
all right.
Nope. No, this is going to continue to be just listen, man, I say it all the time, Doug, embrace the suck. Okay. Embrace the suck. The rebound is not going to happen anytime soon. Manufacturing starts out of China, new contracts out of China continue to be down. Employment numbers out of China continue to slide. The ones that they're not telling us about, right? So the ones that we're able to get out of China continue to slide. Exports out of China are still around those 2019 numbers, which aren't bad. They're not bad. We shouldn't be upset about them. They're not bad. But volumes, no, they're down. And if anything, the state of the American economy and the Western economies, given all the conflicts around the world, people get scared to spend money when people get scared. And people are getting scared. So we should bear that in mind. When people get scared, volumes go down. Sorry, Doug, for all these folks that are full of hope and promise for things yet to come. Next year, another bad year. So Hackett and Associates, whomever they were, with their it's like economist language, right? We all want to hedge our bets when we talk about things. Now I'll just say it. Embrace the suck. It'll be a bad year.
Yeah. Well, good. Yeah, I'm glad that you brought some negativity into the show, Pete, because wait, you did that in your first little bit, so you're living up to your standards. Love
Dr. Doom, baby. That's what I do here, Doug. Yeah.
Yeah, you got your Johnny Cash Black on too, so you're in full character.
You ever heard of Marmite, Doug? That stuff Australians eat on toast?
No.
It tastes awful, but it's good for you. I'm the Marmite of this show. Don't have to like it, but it's what's best for you.
That's a good one. That's a good one. All right, bring us home.
So last topic this week, it has to do with something that doesn't get enough attention, period. But we always talk about what's going to happen. We'll talk about what is happening, but we try to get towards what's happening in the future. Right now, there's a lot of attention being paid to currency markets, whether it's the fact that the Chinese RMB continues to slide because of what's happening with their deflationary economy. That's not good at all. But what's gotten a lot of attention lately is the fact that the euro, it was down against the dollar, had a little rise for a little bit, but it's starting to look like it's going to be at parity. Why is that something that you and I and people in transportation care about? Pretty simple. We want America and the European Union, we as Americans, we want the European Union to have a currency that's not too far off the dollar. And the reason for that is we compete with European countries, Germany, definitely France, the UK, when it comes to higher end exports, innovation exports. So figure pharmaceuticals, aerospace, high end precision manufacturing, military equipment, the list goes on, software, healthcare devices. So we don't want our products necessarily to end up being more expensive because of currency pressures. So if a country outside of the European Union, like Japan, let's say, or Singapore or Australia, is looking to buy equipment like that, and they are looking at the United States as a supplier or a country in the European Union, and all things being equal, currency isn't one of the things that could drive it, right? Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily more expensive. Maybe they'll buy American based off of innovation factors or quality factors, or just based on reputation. So this is actually a good thing because generally, head to head, American products tend to prevail when you look at them statistically. We do pretty damn good on the global market. We tend to make products that people want to buy. So that's good for the American economy, and it's excellent for the kind of jobs that we're trying to keep here in America. So we kind of want this to happen. So we'll be watching that on the show. We'll be reporting on it as we see more about it.
Yeah. I'm surprised it hasn't gotten more attention, right? It's not like, oh, it's, 1.2 or what. I mean, it is almost dollar for dollar the same, right?
Yeah.
Which is crazy. And if you look at, when you kicked that over this morning, Pete, I'm like, okay, let's look at the historical nature. It's been the parity's been there for a while. The last time I went back, I'm like, how far back do you have to go where it was meaningful? And it was 2008. Yeah. I think it was, $1.660 equal to a euro. And that's big. And that's kind of how I've always perceived it, but perceived it to be. But holy cow. I mean, I don't understand why more people aren't talking about it. Let's talk about some good news with reshoring and nearshoring in America. I don't understand why there's not a headline on the Washington Post or the New York Times or the Evening News that talks about the good that parity is going to bring here to the United States. So 100%, I'm glad you brought it up because I don't think anybody's talking about it, at least in I'm not seeing a lot of it related to that, but it's a good point, and I think it bears well for good old U.S. of A.
Well, Doug, why would anybody get their news from those sources when they could just come here to Global Trade This Week?
I love it. That's right. And it is weekly. It's Global Trade This Week.
Yeah. We can just come here.
And with that one, Pete, that's a pretty good transition. You did it, not me. So
Doug.
I know. That was a good transition. So we'll leave it at that. We'll wrap up this episode, Global Trade This Week. I think it was a pretty good show, Pete. We had good commentary on halftime and some really solid topics. So thank you all for listening. Thank Cap Logistics for putting this thing on the air, so to speak, and Keenan pushing the buttons and turning the levers. And as I say, giving us the soapbox to talk about what we would bring to the table in a forward-looking perspective on international trade. That's it, man. Pete, have a good weekend. I'll see you, or a good week. I'll see you next week.
See you, buddy. Take care, everybody.
Okay. All right. Bye. See you.